Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. My name is Cornelius Ahonsi, and I'm your host for the premiere of PIC's Policy Dialogue. Please, can we clap? Um, Nigeria is Africa's most populous nation, like we know, but there are significant food security issues that are made worse by climate change, economic instability, and rapid growing population. Food security is being looked at or is defined as having access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food for all, always. Nigeria's food system, they are under immense pressure due to climate-induced events and economic downturns, disruptions in supply chains. These are the issues that we want to talk about today. We would want to assess the current realities of food security in Nigeria. We want to identify practical solutions to improving this and also explore digital transformative ways and sustainable agricultural improvements that we can advise our policymakers to do. We're going to gain a comprehensive understanding of the challenges that bedevil us as a nation looking at our agri sector and food supply. We're going to identify practical and innovative solutions for these ones, and we're going to kind of develop a roadmap through a policy brief, and that's going to be the output of this conversation. Before we start, I want to introduce our panelists to us. To my far right, we have Mr. Adebayo Adeleke. Mr. Adebayo Adeleke is an experienced supply chain professional with knowledge in risk management, security, geopolitics, indigenous supply chain, security, and trade. He has served for 20 years as a combat veteran in the United States Army. His policy briefs on supply chain, security, and other resources have featured in London School of Economics, the African Reports, and others. The food security project which he leads seeks to establish food security as a national priority, advocate for food security in the national security policies and framework, promote reforms to supply sustainable agri practices and food distribution systems in Nigeria. Please, can you join me and give him a round of applause? Sitting in the middle of the men, we have Ms. Fisayo Kayode. Fisayo is an agribusiness consultant and a strategic development expert, driving high-impact innovation in Africa's food and agri sector for about a decade. She's a senior manager with Sahel Consulting, where she leads value chain analysis, market research, and agribusiness strategy. She's currently spearheading the ALDDN project, which is funded by the Gates Foundation. Her work spans productivity improvement, policy advocacy, and stakeholder engagement to strengthen Nigeria's agriculture and food system sector. Join me to welcome Fisayo. Thank you very much, Fisayo and Adeleke. My first question would be to Mr. Adeleke. What, in your opinion, are the major threats to food security in Nigeria today?
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. I'm glad to be here, Ms. Fisayo and Mr. Cornelius. Thank you for having me. The issue of food security in Nigeria, just like any other nation, is a multi-faceted threat. But for me, the fact that in Nigeria, food security is not a national security imperative is a concern. If you look at human security at large, economic security, environmental security, health security, food security, physical security, political security, communal security, all these 7 expressions of human security, they are supposed to be a national security imperative. And unfortunately, if you look at the national security framework of Nigeria, it's very militarized in nature. and you can't impact what is not being included. So if I believe, wholeheartedly believe that if food security is part of the national security imperative, I think we're going to appeal to most of you. They've never seen it as a national security break. Every other country I have been privileged to work in or part of, there's always a desk of food security as part of the national security framework. But in Nigeria, it is absent. At least the last time I checked, it is absent because anytime we talk about food security, like we were just discussing for this panel, people look at it from an agricultural perspective, and you cannot continue to do that until you see it as a national security imperative. Once you see it as a national security imperative, everything else changes. Everything else, the whole schemes, everything changes. But until then, we're going to be struggling with it. That's just my own opinion and take.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adebayo. Fisayo, what's in your view as a development expert? What are the threats to food security in Nigeria?
The first threat I would say is that people are hungry. It's a big threat when people are very hungry. They think of so many ways to meet their needs, right? And statistically, we have about 32 million people that can't access food in Nigeria. You described it as sufficient, safe, and nutritious. 32 million people cannot access that kind of food. And on the other hand, we have a lot of production losses going on, between 40 to 60%, depending on the value chain, either crop or livestock. So we have production losses, inefficiencies on one hand, and on the other hand, we have increased hunger. Food inflation hit all-time high last year since the 90s to about 41%. And we now need to start thinking of how to address these things. First, reducing the losses, because that's a major threat, and ensuring that those 32 million people, we don't increase the pool of hungry people in Nigeria. Hungry people cannot be productive. They can't contribute substantially to the economy of the country. And those are the big issues that we need to look at in food security.
You've raised a lot of pertinent issues right now. I want to go to Mr. Adeleke to ask him how, because there are issues around climate change, economic stability, demographic pressure that interacts to impact most of these issues that she has raised around availability and affordability of food, because most Nigerians spend half or close to half of their income on feeding. So how does climate change, economic stability, and this demographic pressure, how does it interact to impact food availability and affordability for Nigerians?
It does. To a great extent. Let's look at climate change. I have my own views on climate change, but either backed by data or not backed by data. But climate change has been going on for decades before we came to this earth, and once we exit this earth, we'll continue. The world at large, because of human footprint, will continue to experience difficulty adapting either back and forth. It's like a tug of war between the environment and the people. And as long as we continue to take away from the soil and the environment and we're not replenishing, we are going to continue to experience climate change. Yes, the change in the climate is affecting. It causes, like now, rainfall started in Abuja way before people expected it. A lot of things are changing, and ability to understand the climate change. Oftentimes we might not be able to change what the climate actually is. Well, like we will not be able to change what the climate is going to do, but we have to be able to adapt adapt swiftly. From my historical background, Sahel, Sahara, the Nile has been flooded due to climate change from time immemorial. But what the Egyptians have done over the course of time is to understand that, once the Nile is flooded, they can actually use it to irrigate the Sahel. And they've been able to help them to improve their food security. I believe Nigeria should be able to do the same as well, understand where we are when it comes to, climate change. Nigeria, we have very diverse weather patterns. What is in the north is completely different from what's in the southeast or southwest, and all those things. Ability to understand the uniqueness of our weather patterns and study the change in climate will be able to help us to kind of come up with innovative or indigenous methods to be able to solve, to affect food availability and food security at large. Now, we're talking about the economic impact, right? It's a function of, is it chicken or egg when it comes to these things? Which one comes first? Is it chicken or egg? The same thing. I got into the business of food security. I'm not an agriculturalist by any shape or form. As you can see, I'm a supply chain guy and a security guy. But in the process of doing research on supply chain and security in Nigeria, I figured out that one of the bane of our issues is actually food. Food causes insecurity and instability in most societies. That much really things. And even the larger problem we're not even addressing is water security. It's actually more pregnant now more than anything else. But we learned along the line. And all these things, so when you're beginning to unravel these things, you realize that, people not be able to have, I don't know what the minimum wage is not being adhered to, people not having, good jobs, be able to, definitely they will not be able to get nutritious food and whatnot. So these things we call wicked problem, they are interwoven. You can't really solve one without actually affecting the other. And that's the thing about wicked problems. Once you entangle in it, you really can really solve it. You continue to deal with it until you leave the earth and somebody else is going to take battle from it. But they are so interconnected. Our food availability, affordability will continue to suffer if we don't actually correct our stance on climate change and how we actually view economic, the indigents and all these other folks, how we actually pump money into our economy. Only Lagos, we did a survey. I think most Lagosians spend about 70% of their salary on food. To spend 70% of your salary on food, how much you going to pay on rent, how much you're not even thinking of rent yet. Talking about the other 30% of transportation, Uber, data, Lagosians must have their data for their Twitter and whatnot. So just that give you a deeper understanding of how food is such a part of our lives. Like I always say, food is life. So if we really want to lead the life we want to, we have to actually address that food issue.
Thank you very much for expatiating on that question. Fisayo, thinking about what Mr. Adeleke was saying, in your view, what do we need to do as Nigerians to improve availability, or rather, what should government do? What should development, in quotes, do for food availability and affordability?
All right, thank you. So I'm going to pick it one after the other. I would start from the government. We've worked with the government a lot, and we've seen how they work hard to churn out policies to support the different aspects of food security and also provide support to smallholder farmers. But at the end of the day, when you get to the grassroots where we find the smallholder farmers, it looks like there's breaking connection between the reality and the efforts that the government is doing. So first, we need to stop developing policies or coming up with these government initiatives and interventions based on hypothesis. An example is the farmers need inputs. Let's give them inputs, and then our food security problem will be solved. More interactions have to happen with those farmers at the grassroots level. And we aren't talking about the farmers that will come into the rooms in Abuja to discuss. There has to be a system put in place where there's direct interaction and exchange of information between the farmers and the government agencies or officers. And that way it helps them to make informed decision on policy implementation and initiatives implementation. And how can they address this? First, we have to leverage technology. We have to put technical systems in place that work. We were also talking about how M-Pesa has worked in Kenya and how they worked with cooperatives and farmer cooperatives to start up such initiatives and solutions. We have a lot of young, great people in Nigeria. OP has really done well with fintech, MoneyPoint, Paystack, a lot of them. But why is nobody looking at ag tech and how we can work, and why is the government not finding these people to work with them and the private sector to find a connection and close the gap between the reality and what is happening up there. And so at the end of the day, there's results being achieved, and agriculture or agri-financing or support is not being politicized the way it's currently being done.
Wow, thank you very much. That's a bit insightful. From what you've said, the smallholder farmer needs to be reached by the seedlings from Abuja. The same way cash transfer has not worked, seedling transfer has not worked. Yeah, so I'll go to Mr. Adeleke now. I wanted to talk about strengthening infrastructure and market systems. What infrastructure investments are critical for improving food distribution and reducing post-harvest losses? We had this interaction before coming on set.
Yeah, we did. When we look at the critical infrastructure, we have about 10 of them that are supposed to sustain a nation, education, health, and whatnot. But the supply chain infrastructure in Nigeria is subpar. Let's be real. If you ever traveled, I know a lot of us don't travel on the roads no more. You can't go to Lagos by road, you fly. But if you want to experiment, not at your not at the expense of your own life, or just travel between Abuja and Lagos, you understand certain things. It's really, if you're starting from some of the food basket Kano to follow a trailer. Sometimes we tried it to follow a trailer from Kano to Lagos. It will stop around Abuja or so, Kaduna, because of security reasons. Then you begin to understand the journey of farm to table and why certain critical infrastructure is imperative. The supply chain framework of Nigeria is lacking, and that is actually affecting the food. Understand that the same supply chain infrastructure is the one that every other commodity is actually competing to use. The road, the rail, we have nothing much to write about it. The waterways have not been properly exploited. So when you focus, and then you have the air now for the folks that are quite financially buoyant, they can use those, but it's quite expensive as well. So everybody depends on the road. And of course, when you start talking about the road, look into the post-harvest more depreciability rate. It is about the tomatoes rate from Kano to Lagos. 60% of the tomatoes of the 30-ton truck perishes before they get to what is it called, mile 12. And then you look at it. I'm painting some picture about the supply chain infrastructure in Nigeria, because that is the bane of our post-harvest losses and whatnot. So you move a 30-ton truck of tomato from either from Borno or from Kano. You pay about 2 million naira extra, or both legal and illegal fees when you move it out. So now check that out. That one is going to be kind of spread that million over the 2 million over the exactly. And then once you move south of Niger, every community over there will start taxing you, either legal or illegal. The local government, they open their books and whatnot. The rot is, we can start from here to Timbuktu. We will not finish about some of the perils on the road and some of the hills that kind of plague our supply chain. So the government has to intervene in this. Actually, there is their fiduciary responsibility to strengthen the supply chain infrastructure. The roads, you can't really, last time I checked, you can't just go and be, paving roads in Nigeria, and federal government is going to really, whoop your butt on it. So if the roads are taken care of, the rails are taken care of, the waterways are taken care of, I think will ease a bit on post-harvest losses, But what I mean by taking care of, not only that the infrastructure means, but unnecessary checkpoints. Some of these things that extorts, the drivers. And then the amount of, the fact of the matter that we have no truck stops on these roads. So you see a particular 30-ton truck moving tomato or onions from the north and then park on the road for the next 5 days. And then you'll be calling them, where is this thing? There is this thing. The driver went somewhere and then come back to it. These things they are just part of this whole system. And we can blame the government. The government has its own function to do, but of course we have the market women as well. We talk about the market force, which is the second part of the question. For people in mile 12 to be able to get the price of the basket of tomato, they have to call to Kano to see how much the price was. I don't know why. I think they all belong to the same WhatsApp group, whereby they kind of determine the price market. It's very strange, how people in the I mean, it's a very interesting system. Let me just put it that way, whereby they will be dictating how much the thing is. So you really can't call the shot in our 12 of what the basket of price. You have to look at what is other being. They say now we'll put certain percentages on it and whatnot. And the people that the last mile, people who are the consumers are the one that's going to be at the at the pain point of it all. The government has to intervene in kind of helping to kind of structure those things. It's quite difficult too as well, because you're trying to bring the informal market to the formal world. Because the whole thing, every one of us has a touch point with the informal market. Nigerian markets are very informal, especially when you're talking about fresh fruit and vegetables, food products are very informal. And the challenge in understanding and regulating market prices is because we are trying to understand the formal market forces, which is completely different from the formal market forces. So you're trying to, and that could be quite difficult. Again, we the people are the one that's going to be getting the brunt of it every time. So those two elements, the government has a function, and I'm not. I'm a federalist by nature, my political leaning. So I also believe that the government has its own function, and the government is not God. People also have their own responsibility to partake in the government. But there's silent duties and responsibilities as inherent of government, understanding and giving the people the supply chain infrastructure that is needed. Because once the supply chain infrastructure is solid, every other thing is the hospital, the education, the power, everything will take care of itself. But unfortunately, if that is lacking, everything else will be lacking.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Adeleke. I want to go to you, Fisayo. Before we came on set, we were talking about reducing post-harvest losses. And based on your experience and looking at food distribution, because most times, like Mr. Adeleke has said, we talked about, maybe let's not go into the aflatoxins, but they looking at the tomato coming all the way from Kano before it gets to Maitu. A lot has happened to that tomatoes, and a lot is going to happen to the person that's going to eat that tomato from a nutrition point of view. So thinking about that, and based on what you do, how do we increase our efficiency in food production, and how do we reduce post-harvest losses?
Thank you. Mr. Adeleke already said that we have a weak supply chain. And that's where we need to start from. We need to strengthen the supply chain from farm to table. We'll still use tomatoes as an example. So when it leaves the farm, it goes to the market in Kano or in Borno or in Jos, and then they aggregate it and send it down to my 12 in Lagos. First, the baskets we use to convey these tomatoes, they are not the right equipment to use to convey tomatoes. We need proper tomato crates. We need pack houses. So when they're aggregating from the farmers in Borno, it's not going to, Borno is hot. It's not going to an open market where the heat will first deal with the tomatoes before it's even they offtake it from Borno to Lagos. We have proper cold chain pack houses, cooling systems, considering clean energy, and then the farmers can take their tomatoes there, and there's an aggregation system either through cooperatives or private sector led processors or aggregators. They keep the tomatoes there, and the trucks that take the tomatoes from Borno to Lagos, or if we want to use the rail system, they also have cooling systems in them. Using the tomatoes crates, then we move those products to Lagos. So infrastructure, we need to really invest in infrastructure. Private sector, government sector, we need to come together and partner and consider how we can have regional-based infrastructure, communal-based infrastructure, so that when it gets to Lagos, tomato is still wholesome, nutritious, and safe to consume. Most restaurants in Lagos will buy they call it Esha, right? and that's what people will go and consume. Esha has aflatoxins in it, and we've talked about how it's a big cause of factor that affects cancerous diseases and so on. So those are things that we have to think about and come together to address those things. I'm going to also mention another scenario, still using tomatoes. I think it was 2023 when we had the flooding issue in Kogi State. And because Kogi is like in the middle, we couldn't convey food from the north to the south, and we couldn't convey things or goods from the south to the west for about 2 weeks. Flooded, grounded. We had trucks of food that were on standstill for those 2 weeks, and everything perished. They couldn't move. We had partners that were victims of that, and the billions went down the drain because of that experience. And we are talking about climate resilience. Flooding is one of them. We don't have intelligence to well, I learned that people were pre-informed. I even received some messages on WhatsApp, all these WhatsApp groups on, the alert about the flooding. But what did agencies like NEMA do about it so that they can support to address issues and rescue the food that was supposed to go to Lagos from wherever it was coming from? And imagine we also have regional based storage systems like the pack houses for tomatoes and proper warehouses for grains and cold systems for meat and milk and everything that's supposed to move. And you have issues with your truck, you have flooding that wouldn't allow you to move, you have insecurity you encountered or you are going to encounter on the way, and you've received an intelligence that this is happening when you're approaching Lokoja. But there's a regional based pack house or warehouse just right before Lokoja. You could just branch, pack, offload, or even if it's a cooling van, it could still stand the test of time till when things are resolved, and then we continue to move those goods to where it's going to. So we need intelligence, data sharing, and information sharing. We need infrastructure development to make things really work, to reduce the production losses and inefficiencies that happens along the value chain.
From being a Nigerian for so long, we've not had the privilege of having responsible governments. So for everything that has worked for us as a nation, it has been private sector led. From airline, remember there was Nigerian Airways. We are right now, we're insulting some certain airlines. We have forgotten where we're coming from. So it took them to intervene for us to be able to move the way we do. For healthcare and most of the other sectors, it has taken private sector. There needs to be some sort of public-private sector partnership to support food development. I will start with Mr. Adeleke. How do you think we can have this? You talked about the lab, right? So how can there be that public-private sector partner? Because, for example, I have people I work with who are scared of eating certain things in Nigeria because of what we know about how they are preserved and how they are sold. And that's where something like a reference lab that you spoke about comes into play. But how do we have this private sector and public sector partnership that comes together to strengthen those weak points that we have identified?
So, historically speaking, Nigerian government should not be part of anything that has to do with running reference lab. Which is anything that has to do with profit and losses and efficiency. Nigerian government, should step back from it and let it be private led. Just like you said, anything that has been of good has been led by private sector. But what we need the government to do is through policy and bills to be able to mandate or give a working environment for partnership between both the government, the academics, because the academics also has a part to play here, and also the private sector. The 4 pillars of food security: availability, accessibility, affordability, and then probably the most important one that we don't talk about much is the food quality and safety, which for most Nigerians, they really don't care. From the elites to the non-elite, they don't care, because as long as they have food every day, food is food. But again, not everything that glitter is gold. Not every food, not all fresh foods are actually good for your body. As you have a health background, so you'll be able to attest to this. And what we've seen, not only Nigeria, but Africa as a whole, Sub-Saharan Africa, we've not been able to test our foods. I mean, in areas whereby most of everything that we eat is adulterated, is fake, reagent they use. I mean, I was having a conversation the other day. People's blood group are really, people like, and I'm AS. Somebody said that I'm AA. I was like, how did that even happen overnight? Because you can't even get the lab result right. In human, the hematology or whatever it's called, talk less of food that we eat. It's countless of result of Nigerian food failing reliability testing where they get to more sophisticated labs overseas. And so if that is happening, you can only imagine, what our food process goes through. Is it people that are using, is it sniper? Carbide to ripen. They use sniper to do all kind of stuff for beans, to kill the bean weaves and whatnot. So, and these things, and you go to the market, it's open, it's like food is there, nobody's testing. The other day we went to a market like that, and they be like, there's different type of gari. It's like, what's the difference? Like, this one is more expensive than this. Like, I'm trying to figure out, gari is gari, but apparently it's not. There's one is more rich in starch than the other, which I guess depending on your pockets, it will depend on what kind of gari you're gonna drink that day. But again, some of these things you kind of scratch your head when you go over there. So when it comes to food quality and safety, the government has a major role to play, is to establish an environment and condition at which all these things are going to play. I don't expect the government to run. I mean, if our government is strong enough, it will be something that we can advise to provide policy, provide the parameters at which some of these things, provide what is consumable, what these thresholds of this particular element is not good for this food. Yes, those are the functions of the government. When it comes to agricultural reference lab being established, I believe my own experience going through lobbying for it, the jurisdictional issues, the interests, that is not national interest driven, is very, very killing. But for us to be able to, one thing I've discovered is that, and I always say this every time I have the opportunity, is that whatever you put into your body, the body will require of you at some point in your life, will ask you questions. So either you eat good food or bad food, at some point your body will require, either in your later years in life or early years in life, the body will require you, and oftentimes we don't have answers to those questions. So my own suggestion is, in this kind of situation, especially the public-private partnership, the government should lay down the foundation for partnering, establish the thresholds. These are the parameters. If you're going to sell tomatoes, these are what tomatoes are supposed to look like. A proper tomato is supposed to look like. European governments, they have, somebody was saying that why is bread in Europe always go bad after like 4 days? Whereas in America and Nigeria, you see bread still going strong in like 4 months. Makes you wonder, like, what are we eating? Because Europeans have a very strict standard, and ideally, if you look at Europeans, they actually live longer, they live healthier, because they are very concerned about what they put in their body. But Nigeria, you feel like you see the bread, before the even bread has mold on it, probably like 6 months, really, that's the average life. The same thing in the US as well. So it makes you realize that what are you actually ingesting into your body, and for me, I think personally, what I put in my body is very. I'm quite concerned about it these days, because the water we drink, the food we eat. I mean, it's really concerning, because the older you get, the more you realize that you take health for granted, and some of these diseases that we've kind of find out throughout till once you get to midlife and beyond, you begin to realize that you can't really roll back time. So it is very, very important that we might not have good health insurance or good health care, but if you actually eat good, wholesome, nutritious food, you might be able to scale through some of these issues in life. So
Thank you very much. I just remember that personally, there are parts of the world I go to and I don't eat chicken. And it's advisable not to, because you might. Anyways, I just coming from what you just said about the type of food. There's something AI is here, and whether we behave like it has not come or it's not coming, it's upon us. And I want to ask Fisayo, what are there systems, or are there solutions that we can adopt based on technologies or technology that's going to help us better our food systems in Nigeria?
Yes. So, but by the virtue of what I do, I have done a lot of research on different value chains, and I've gotten to that point where when I see things on the shelf, I don't buy them. I have to read through ingredients. So what he mentioned is not even only pertaining to the informal markets. Even the formal markets, the packaged products, a lot goes into it. And when I find out these things from maybe research or some value chain analysis, I'm always alarmed. And I'm linking that to reference lab or having quality testing systems and laboratories. We can leverage AI, we can leverage blockchain. I understudied something similar in Brazil, where in their dairy sector, your products can't go out until it goes, like, you submit your quality tests information and results to a central lab, and then they revert back that this batch of products can go out. And that means that there's touch points, there's a blockchain systems that enables food traceability and makes things really easy to conduct. And those are things that we need to start looking at, how to connect the producers to these central laboratory offices, and how to leverage blockchain, IoT, to ensure that there's seamless move of information in a way that it's not being altered, or you know there's if information is missing along the line. So what you send is what is received, and everything is just transparent and clear and easy to track, and it's going to be used to make decisions. Another thing is labeling. There's a lot of food fraud happening in Nigeria. I'll still use dairy as an example. You go to the shelf to pick up milk, and they write milk, and then you read the labels. You start saying, when you look closely, you start saying soy, lecithin, fats from whatever, palm oil, and I'm like, where's the milk? There's no milk in this product. So there's a lot of food fraud and mislabeling happening, and that is where we should ensure that we are engaging with the regulatory agencies to regulate everything that goes out. I don't think a lot of work is even as simple as water. There's a lot of packaged water out there that is not clean and safe, but people buy every day. So what are the regulatory agencies, NAFDAC, SON doing, and how are we within the food security sector engaging them to ensure that everything that goes out is properly labeled and there's no food fraud happening in the system? So those are things that we have to call out. For example, you talked about the food security bill. We need a section that mandates proper labeling and the processes that have to be taken to ensure that that happens. And we need to call out the different players and stakeholders, the government, what are their roles, regulations, policies, and so on. The private sectors, what are their roles? And we as consumers, we also have a role to play. How can we whistleblow when we see products that are not well labeled? Are there systems where we can go put in reports so that it goes back to whoever is regulating it, and the system just works together for the whole ecosystem?
Wow. So thank you very much. You've brought up an issue about food labeling. I remember that there was a country in Europe where a particular company labeled the same drug with different names, and I think that had been they were fined. They were fined. I think that's been one of the largest fine for a pharma company. And I know that in Nigeria there are companies that sell the same products under different names, and because we usually don't even just just read the label. Because yesterday I bought a particular product. When I saw it, I was like, this company has left Nigeria. So I just looked at it closely. And when I looked, I saw something different. But it was labeled with that company that had left Nigeria. So I want to open the floor to our audience to ask questions. Okay, I'll start.
All right. Can I?
Yep.
Thank you very much, Art. But I call them panelists now, but thank you so much, discussants. Femi Bedari is my name. I work with the Policy Innovation Center within the BRI Innovation Lab. Now, quite a lot of things have been said, and you would say that some of these things are actually known within the system, right? And then also it brings to mind, or it begs the question of how effective is policy engagement within Nigeria to ensure that some of these wonderful thoughts, or if you would say evidence-based ideas, are really being implemented or being integrated into policy making and implementation. That's one dimension that I hope that we're able to speak to. The second question I would like to ask has to do with if you would itemize what should be the priorities right now, priority actions right now, what would you call them, right? Either policy alternatives, because we can't do everything at once, we know that. We can solve all the problems immediately, and perhaps they all won't give us the same level of impact if we begin to try to implement. So from your experience of the industry and your knowledge and expertise, what would you call those perhaps first three things that should be priority, the anyone within government or development or even the private sector should be considered? Thank you.
So, as you said, knowledge isn't action. And what we need to do is take action. We don't have a lot of people nudging the different stakeholders to get things done in Nigeria. We do the conferences, we do the workshops, and then everybody go home and nothing happens. So we have to really push for action. And that's where private sector-led industry associations come in. So let's assume that there's a Tomato Farmers Association of Nigeria, and they've been experiencing this challenge every year, year in, year out. The loss, the lack of infrastructure affects them. But they've not primarily engaged with investors, with the government to say, look, we want to take ownership. This is our sector. We want to do something about it. And they're nudging them to commit and start getting things done and partnering together to, okay, yeah, this year we are doing this in this region. It's going to cost this. We'll do some fundraising or whatever, attract investors to do it. So we talk a lot, but different people just sit in their bubble and don't really bother about taking actions and point fingers at the people in government that it's not working. So as individuals, as private sector, as researchers, as consultants, we need to start really getting on our feet to engage and nudge the different sectors to take action. That's the first thing I would say. To your second question, early this year I attended a strategy development session from the ministry. They were developing a 5-year strategy plan for a particular sector, subsector within agric. I wouldn't mention names. And the first 2 hours of that day was used to debate on what is the population of livestock farmers and cattle we have in Nigeria. And, MBS said this, FAO said this one said this. And we're like, this is a problem. If we don't know, then we need to do something about it. We need to launch a very robust census for farmers and livestock in Nigeria. We don't know the farmers. We don't know where they are. We don't know what they are doing. We don't have information on their activities. We don't have historical data to help us. Some people have the data in pocket. For example, AFX, Babangona, they've done a lot with farmers aggregation and input support. So they have data. Sahel has data. Some private sector has data. Some government and the local government, they have some data. But how do we pull them together and integrate? Because that is where it's important for us to make data-driven decision. We have limited data on what is happening in the agriculture space. So we need to launch something that pulls data together in one place, and that will help with reaching the farmers at the grassroots. It's going to help with market intelligence. It will help with disseminating information about climate change or some innovations or support coming in from maybe the government, the investors, and so on. So we need to first know what is going on where and who is doing what across the country, across all value chains, across all level of the food systems. I'll just stop there.
Okay. I think what was the first question again? Yeah, policy engagement. Okay. Yeah. So, in a democratic government, to make anything happen, is you have to is through policy and bills. There's not way else. It's just the way it is, because of the way democratic government are structured. So, and oftentimes, as policymakers or people that advise, policymakers, we think that, doing working groups, stakeholders engagement, drafting the bill, pushing it through, first reading, second reading, it's been signed and enacted, and then our job actually has pretty much ended. No, we have to see through the cradle to grave to make sure that the policy actually is working the way it's supposed to work. And I think that's where the implementation part of the policy is where we really disengage. Really follow through the life cycle of policy making, you realize that it doesn't stop when the policy is enacted. It continues, the continuous process. It's a continuous process whereby you monitor and evaluate the impact of the policy. Is it actually doing the work that's supposed to do? If not, can we continue? Can we do an addendum? Can we fix it? How do we fix it? And those things. But we don't usually do that for some strange reasons. Why those things? So, but for us, my advice is, as policymakers, we need to understand that there's cradle to grave to this, and this is a cyclic cycle. It doesn't end. We'll continue to monitor it until that intended end state is achieved. On the second part, as my sister here is over the talking about data, it's like flesh and blood has not revealed this thing to you, because that's what one of the things that we discovered in Nigerian food security project is that data is lacking, and a lot of people have data to support individual things they are doing in their own sector, but in aggregate, a place whereby researchers, people, policymakers can go like a data bank to have, is it on weather, on livestock or whatnot, is absent. And we are trying to do our own part in our own hand, but we need more people in the space to be able to give, because the data is necessary to be able to implement policy, to be able to develop, is it AI? She talked about blockchain and, traceability. These are things that will really help the industry down the road. If I must do the first three, the three things to do, data aggregation is one. Either to understanding the farmer, digitalization of the farmlands, you can even look about the road connectivity, how to assist supply chain. All these things are all connected to data. You can't do anything, especially in this dispensation, without having data. It has to be data driven. The second part, we did the first food security index last year. To really have a major impact on food security, you have to start building secondary storage facilities to ease this issue of post-harvest losses or whatnot. It is important. If state government and local government can start building these facilities and start, working with each other. I mean, the federal government, the 33 ones that we have, anyways, there's nothing to write home about them. So what will the state and local government be? But again, is the ownership. The state and local government can start taking ownership of this. If this present administration believes that autonomy of the local government is imperative, and then we need to start with the food security as well, so that, because that's where the rubber meets the road. Let the local government, because if anything happens, you're not going to take your pan or sack and go to the state headquarters. You go to your local government headquarters or ward, which is quite accessible to you. So we have to, for us to even talk about anything about food security, people need to be able to access food first. There has to be availability of food first. Everything else will now become secondary. And then the last but not the least, this is very near and dear to my heart, is food safety and quality of food. The quality of food that we're eating in Nigeria is even better, to be honest with you. Some places I've been, even the US, which I, kind of floating between. You can make chicken are raised in 8 weeks. I don't know if anyone you can eat chicken that's raised in 8 weeks, but that's the normal thing. Anything after 8 weeks, it doesn't make an economic sense anyway. So if I look at these chicks, I'm like, in 8 weeks, I'm gonna be putting it into my tummy. This particular, you look, it's kind of creepy sometimes, but it's the world we live in. The money and self-interest trumps the health of people, and that's the world we live in. It's a capitalist-driven world and whatnot. So, and then at the end of the life, we work so much to attain this wealth, and then at the end of the world, at the end of our life, when these diseases comes around, we use the same money that we've accrued over the course of time to actually to make ourselves whole again, to find, a healthy body. It's a very crazy world we live in. But that's just my own, three things I would actually do when it comes to itemization, or what to do when it comes to food security.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adeleke. The guy on brown.
My name is Atunde Olaiwaji Ahmad. I work as a young researcher with Restless Development. And so my key takeaways are, first off, the fact that there is a need for us to treat food security as a national security. And the other one is the fact that there's also the need for us to address it from the One Health thought, wherein you think about the fact that when people are hungry, they are unable to be productive. And because they are not productive, they tend to look for another way to address this. Then, okay, I used to live by the bank of River Basin. Is that the one in Adamawa State, Yola? Then there was a time that all of the farmers had to live for like 3 months because of flood. Then you realize that like 40% of them, like the ones I used to interact with because they passed to the front of my house, do not come to farm again. And that is because I feel the warning system regarding flood, pests, and all are networking. He has talked about data, you have talked about AI and blockchain. My question is, how do we give them access? I'm currently working on a solution that uses AI to inform persons about possibility of flood and other climate issues. But accessing people in the community seems to be hard. As a researcher, I used to tell people, everything about research is not expensive, but data. I feel data is expensive. If you want the real data, and not UNICEF said, WHO said, the real data is expensive. How do we enhance the access to the people and their own access to these new tools, putting in consideration the fact that they also have limitations when it comes to how tech savvy they are and the limitation of the tools that they have?
So thank you.
So the archetype of farmers that you talk about, most of them are non-literate, and we can't fault them at this point. We have to adapt to make sure that regardless, they can still benefit from AI and digital transformation. For every state and local government, there are desk officers. And these desk officers, they also have limited knowledge on these digital tools. For example, the solution that you are working on. But they are there, they are employed, they go to work every day. They use paper and whatever that they've been used to. So the way to domesticate and disseminate things down to those set of farmers could be that we go find these desk officers at their local government levels and equip them with these solutions, with how to use the technology tools and everything, so that they can further disseminate through their extension officers to the farmers. Another way could be through radio programs. Farmers listen to radio. They might not have the smartphones, but they have radio. So if we could connect our solution with most of the local radio houses within those communities, then that's another way to reach the farmers and engage them and provide timely information to them on flooding, drought, climate change, and every other thing that you can think of. And finally, I would say that we don't pay enough attention to some, they call them society organizations, right? So we have a lot of society organizations, even religious bodies, through churches, through mosques, and so on. How are we engaging their leaders? A lot of people go to church and mosques in Nigeria. So it's a very sweet spot to find them and share information, and they listen a lot to their leaders. Can we have them also have programs that connect to food? They can even connect it to food and religion. Sorry, now in the Bible there was the issue of drought and famine that happened for 7 years. Joseph had to aggregate food. So it's a thing that they would like to listen to and take action when we go through those religious organizations, CSOs and so on. But there's no one direct way to address it. We have to look for different ways to really reach these people. 70 to 80% of Nigerian farmers are smallholder farmers. And as much as we are encouraging commercialization of agribusiness in Nigeria so we can produce at large scale, we cannot ignore these people that are 1 in 7 of the population of the country that produces. That's their livelihood. That's their means of the small income that they can make. So it's important to work around it and use every touch point to reach them.
Yeah, just to caveat to what Ms. Fisayo said, it bugs me that at this day and age that we still have difficulty passing along flooding information. Flooding is something that oftentimes, once you understand the precipitation and you understand what the particular environment can take, you can actually predict the outcome of the flooding. In this age, it's very interesting that we still cannot disseminate the issue. But one thing I also do understand, I think I share it prior to us coming here, is that if the government is really interested in passing this information across to you, they will. Case in point, during the electoral process, there's a political security here. Every nooks and crannies of this country get ballots, right? During campaign season, everybody knows who to vote for. So why is it not applicable for food security? That's it. Thank you.
Please, can we give a round of applause to our panelists? So one of the key takeaways from this for us is there are solutions, there are policy solutions, but we need to engage those that would nudge. Not enough people are nudging, so we need to nudge so that food security becomes one of those important security issues in our country. There are digital solutions to most of the challenges that we are facing in our food system, and what we need to do apart from engaging is supporting policymakers. Many times they want to do stuff, but they don't know how to do stuff. So we need to support them. Next time you're buying a food product, please read the label. Until next time, on the policy dialogue, please have a great afternoon. Round of applause, please.